begin to take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. We're going to begin working with koans. We're going to go through the 48 cases of the collection known as the Mumonkan. And before we begin doing that, I'd like to talk a little bit about koans and koan practices. Now imagine if we had a dialogue between Einstein and Niels Bohr. And the dialogue was recorded and written down. And we presented that dialogue and said, okay, here's the dialogue. I want you to understand what they're talking about. Or suppose we had a dialogue between two people who were talking about the lessons that can be learned from deep despair. We had a recording of that. We had a little presentation of that. Well, for us to actually understand what Niels Bohr and Einstein are talking about, or for us to understand what two people are talking about when they're talking about something that's very deep and intimate, we have to know that states of mind. We have to have a good foundation in theoretical physics and be able to truly understand that, be able to understand the wave and particle view of electrons. We'd have to be able to know for ourselves something about deep despair. If we haven't touched deep despair, somebody talking about the lessons that could be learned there make no sense. What we have with koans is we have a little dialogue, little snippets of dialogue. We have an expression of people talking about the ultimate, talking about the non-dual, talking about the different expressions and the unfolding of the non-dual. So in order to understand these dialogues, these interactions, we have to partake of the same state of mind. And so the koans are essentially tools that help us to learn to rest in the direct experience of awakening and the functioning of that awakening. So these koans, these tools, are not some extra thing. Okay, I'm now going to, open the book to case number 16. I'm now going to do this thing. But they are ways of learning to embody and investigate one's own life. Now, in the spiritual tradition, there are two basic approaches. There's the vipassana, the looking into approach, the samatha, the calm abiding approach. We often say shikantaza in the Zen tradition, or koan practice. The shikantaza practice is a practice that Dogen often talks about, a practice of you rest in one mind, you rest in inclusivity, you rest in the non-dual. In the non-dual, obviously, there is nothing extra. There's nothing outside, there's only the non-dual, otherwise it wouldn't be the non-dual. And it can't be a thing because you can't be outside of it to point at it. It only can be the manifestation of this life. And so shikantaza is sitting in the manifestation of the non-dual. Whereas the vipassana aspect of practice, or the koan aspect of practice, uses curiosity, uses creativity, uses investigation to go into and to look at the same place. They're all about the non-dual. I mean, it's essentially what the spiritual path is about. Not the non-dual of I know the non-dual, which is not non-dual because there's an I and a knowing of it, but the direct expression of the one mind. So there are many kinds of koans, and some point directly at this, some require you to embody it, some require you to express it with words, some require you to understand it in a rational or non-rational way. So with the dialogues, if we think about non-dual, that means that we are all sides of these dialogues. That when we have a koan, like we're going to talk about this evening, a monk in all seriousness asked the great master Joshu, we are both the monk and the great master. In this case, the dog too. That all of the elements of a koan are nothing but our own mind, are nothing but our own life. And part of the challenge of koans is we keep thinking, I am a separate self, I am this person, I am this little individual here who has to then manipulate, learn, manifest something extra. It's all the embodiment of the non-dual. So koans aren't some magic pill. Yeah, I'll do koan practice and I'll get a quick way to make good progress. Any practice can go very deep, but koans can help refine and help to facilitate the functioning of your understanding. Koans are often more likely to require that you let go of something than you understand something. Often it's our very understanding, oh yeah, I think it looks like this, I think I understand that, I understand this. That very understanding itself is what trips us up, causes us to go blind. So often koans are used as a way of letting go of what we understand, letting go of what we know, letting go, shaving away what's extra, and allowing what is present to be embodied. So koans keep us unstuck, they can keep us creative. The text that I'm going to be talking about is the Mumonkan. Mumonkan is a classic text, classic Zen text. It was written in China back in the 13th century, in the 1200s. It's called the Mumonkan, the Gateless Gate. Mumon was a Zen master Mumon, and the Kan means the record of his talk, so it's sort of the record of Mumon. But the Gateless Gate is a term that says, okay, the non-dual, the great Buddha mind, great wisdom, is completely always present. There is nothing but that. And yet, it's a gate because we don't see it. It's a gate because we somehow feel we're outside of that gate. And so to pass through this gate is part of what these koans are about. To recognize the nature of the gate itself. To recognize that from one side there is an impenetrable barrier, on the other side is wide open space. So we're going to be looking at the Mumonkan, and there are a few cultural expressions in it, but it always points to what is most intimate. Now, the Mumonkan has a particular format. So there are 48 cases. Each case has a little story, primary story or primary exchange, that primary dialogue I was talking about. And then Master Mumon makes a comment, and then he also makes a poem about it. So, depending upon the week and the particular koan, we might unfold that in several different ways. As I mentioned earlier, the koans are not magic pills. You know, well, I'm going to work on koans. But they are a way to actually engage and to work with a teacher. One of the uses of koans is after you've been practicing for a bunch of years, using breath, using quieting the mind, of practicing the power of presence. Well, koans give you something to interact with, something to struggle over, something to begin to engage with the teacher with. So they're, at least the way we've been using them here, they are they're a practice that certain people have more affinity with. Everybody does not need to do koans. They're also designed so that the more we talk and think about them, the further from the truth we'll be. So koans are actually written in such a way as to try to trap you, trap us. They look like it's an obvious thing on the surface, and our mind thinks about it and says, oh yes, I got that. But the point of the koan, the inside of the koan, the expression of the koan, is often something that is more fundamental. And of course you only learn that by doing them. Now in the Mumonkan, the very first case is perhaps one of the most famous cases of all famous koans in the Zen tradition, the koan Mu. And the case begins something like, a monk in all seriousness asked the great master Joshu, does a dog have a Buddha nature? And Joshu replies, no. Mu. This is the essential koan of non-duality. The essential koan of non-duality. And it's hard to pass because I can't pass it. It can't be passed because if you could, there would be two things. So when we're working on a koan like Mu, which is the quintessential koan, which is the entrance gate to the gateless gate, the koan words themselves aren't so important. The way it's laid out, a monk in all seriousness, this is not a trivial question. This is somebody who has perhaps a burning doubt. You know, am I, even a dog like me, have the potential for Buddhahood, have the potential for awakening, have the Buddha mind? And of course, the classic answer you'd expect, because that's what all the texts say, is, you know, everybody has the Buddha mind is your true nature is everywhere. It expects him to say, yes, of course, that everyone has this true nature, but it's not a matter of having. And so Joshu says, no, which in Chinese is wu, in Japanese is mu. And they use Joshu, or Chaochu, the Chinese name, as an exemplar of the highest wisdom. So there probably wasn't somebody sitting around and, you know, Joshu and this monk had this conversation and somebody was writing it down and, you know, said, oh, this is a good one, I'll put it in the book. You know, it's probably something that Mumon kind of heard something like this and tweaked it and shaped it, honed it down to the essence. And so he used the great master Joshu, one of the wisest, highest teachers of Dharma in China, a wisdom master. He uses him as this role to say, this koan has even a dog, a Buddha nature. And Joshu's response is very, very important. It has something in it that is essential. Now, I often translate it as, or not translate, I often just talk about it like, is even a rat, even a disgusting, worthless person like me, because dogs in China were kind of feral and not house pets. So there's mongrels, even a mongrel, a scruffy, homeless mongrel who's starving and out in the streets and filled with lice and worms and fleas. Even a scruffy thing like that, is he whole and complete, lacking nothing? And Joshu says, Mu. Now sometimes he says yes, and sometimes there's other dialogues that go along with it. So the koan here is, what is this truth that Joshu is pointing at? What is the non-dual truth that he's pointing at? Now, when we start thinking about this, we can think about this and we can exhaust the intellectual possibilities of this line in about 4.5 seconds. What can you do? True nature, no true nature, where's the true nature? There's no grist for the mill there to think about. So the way we have to work on this particular koan is we have to understand the quintessential answer that Joshu gives. We have to understand the essence of this answer. The highest teacher in China, the most wise person in China, is answering the most fundamental question of, is this broken, inadequate person capable of awakening? And of course, if we want to be really good and socially correct, we say, oh yes, of course. Practice. You'll get it. But Joshu says, no. It's not a thing. Not something to be gotten. Not something that you can have. And he, with this Mu, points to the very essence of being. So when we're working on a koan like Mu, the way we tend to do it, the way people do it, is you take Mu and you begin to use Mu as a focal point. Now, you can do that at many different levels. We can go, moo, 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 moo. You know, I'm doing moo. Or we can do it at a profound level where there is nothing but moo. So as we sink into anything, whether we're doing toning in the Zendo or some types of retreats, whether we're doing boundless mind, to go completely inside of it so that it is doing itself. So the challenge of this koan is to become so completely immersed, embedded in Mu. There's nothing outside. There's not, I am doing Mu, I am busy thinking about Mu, there's only Mu. So if you look at your hand, and instead of seeing hand, you see Mu, and you think about yourself, and instead of seeing self, you see Mu. And thinking about your body, instead of seeing body, you see Mu. So that the mind's view is everything is the same thing. There is nothing outside of it. There is just this one expression of life. Now, it can have many expressions of life, but this is the non-dual expression of life. So this koan is a profound koan that guides, demands, that we taste at least a little bit of the place of non-discrimination. In a way, we can say Dharma at this level is the essential, is the highest level of non-discrimination. You know, we work on all sorts of things about racial non-discrimination and gender non-discrimination and, you know, salary non-discrimination. But the one bright mind, the one mind of Mu has no other. It has no other. And so to actually see the place that has no other, that undercuts all of the distinctions that we're always making, and to see that, and to see that as the source of all things, which can't be found, is a profound way of working with this koan. So this koan is one that people have struggled with for years. And it's a koan that will also continue to unfold, can continue to unfold for years. So I started working on this koan with Roshi Capello back in the 60s, worked with Aiken Roshi, worked with Harada Roshi for far too long, I think. Mm-hmm. You know, many, many times over with Mayazumi Roshi, with Genpo Roshi. The koan Mu is not a simple koan that you say, oh yeah, I got it. Check that one off. But it's something that is always calling you to the very deepest being, the very deepest awareness, to the root of all things. So this koan, Master Mumonkan has a wonderful commentary, which in some places I used to hear this over and over and over again from different teachers. It's so potent, so powerful, that I'll read some of his commentary. In studying Zen, one must pass the barriers set up by the ancient Zen masters. For the attainment of incomparable enlightenment, one has to cast away the discriminating mind. Those who have not passed the barrier and have not cast away the discriminating mind are all phantoms haunting trees and plants. Now, of course, as soon as you write something like that down, you're already in a muddle. You know, I'm now going to cast something away, and I'm going to have something left. And already he's setting up this impossible barrier, because Mu is not about casting anything away or getting anything. It's about what is. But the challenge is we have to go beyond the discriminating mind, and we have to be able to not be caught by it, because everything is included. So the practice of going to the place where the mind is still with Mu, what he means by casting away the discriminating mind is not, I'm going to get rid of something else. Everything is going to become Mu. Mu has no discrimination. It's just Mu, inside, outside, and in between. Just Mu. Those who have not passed the barrier and have not cast away the discriminating mind are all phantoms, haunting trees and plants. It's an interesting koan, that line in itself. Now tell me, what is the barrier of the Zen masters? Just this Mu. It is the barrier of Zen. It is called the gateless barrier of Zen. Those who have passed the barrier will not only see Joshu directly and clearly, but will go hand in hand with all of the masters, all of the Buddhas. Past. The entire lineage. All the great Dharma teachers, they're teaching right here, not someplace else. You'll go hand in hand with all the masters of the past and see them face to face. You will see with the same eye that they see with. Hear with the same ear that they hear with. This is not hyperbole. This is not some mystical thing. This is talking about these ears, these eyes. It's talking about these ears and these eyes are not separate from anything. All of the ears, all of the eyes. But our mind is so busy thinking, oh, I'm such a separate, small little worm that we can't see this. You will see with the same eye that they see with and hear with the same ear. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Don't you want to pass the barrier? If you do, then concentrate yourself into this Mu. Concentration is an essential part of the spiritual path. Without being able to hold our attention on something, without being able to hold our attention on Mu, on the body, on the breath, on one bright mind, on spacious awareness, without concentration, it is really hard to make any kind of progress. We have to have that skill to some degree. It can be infinitely deep, but to some degree, we have to be able to hold our attention where we want to put it. Because it is holding our attention on something, looking at it deeply, allows it to reveal itself to our eye. One says, then concentrate yourself into this Mu with your 360 bones and 84,000 pores, making your whole body one great inquiry. Day and night work intently at it. Do not attempt nihilistic or dualistic interpretations. Don't say, oh yeah, everything is empty, nothing matters, it's all... Nor, I understand this, I got that. It's like having bolted a red-hot iron ball. You try to get rid of it. You can't. Now, of course, that's just figuratively. It's a figure of speech. But it just means the inquiry, the demand, the calling, the aspiration to embody the truth, to know the Dharma, is so deeply in you. So much is you. It can't be gotten rid of. It can't be let go of. And yet, it's an incessant pulling, demand. He says, cast away your illusory, discriminating knowledge and consciousness. Everything that's accumulated up to now, and keep on working harder. Cast away. And you don't say, I'm now going to be busy casting away. You just focus on Mu. Mu. Now my experience working on Mu is sometimes I start off very intently. I am going to just do Mu with all my energy. But as Mu fills your body, mind, and the whole universe, it becomes the very intensity itself, not the intensity of getting, but the intensity of being. Continue with Mumon here. After a while, when your efforts come to fruition, all oppositions, that's what I mean by non-dual, all opposition, such as inside and outside, will naturally be identified, will be clear, cease. You will then be like a mute person who has had a wonderful dream. They only know it personally, within themselves. Suddenly you break through the barrier, and you will astonish the heaven and shake the earth. It is as if you had snatched the great sword of General Khan. You kill the Buddha if you meet him. You kill the ancient masters if you meet them. On the brink of life and death, you are utterly free. And in the 6 realms and the 4 modes of life you live, with great joy, a genuine life in freedom. By killing the Buddha and killing the masters, it means we have some idea that there's this thing out there. Become the thing. You know, there's these people out there, when it is our very life itself is the embodiment. And so he's talking about just the discrimination itself, the separation itself is cut through. Now how should one strive? With all of your might and main, work on this Mu. Be Mu. If you do not stop or waver in your striving, then behold, when the Dharma candle is lighted, darkness is at once ceases. It's a referral to, in the dark, if you light one little candle, suddenly the entire darkness is transformed from one little candle. And one little candle is the same light as the sun, and yet the quality of them is vastly different. So often when people are working on a koan like Mu, they can have an insight, a glimpse. And that glimpse, like a little candle lit in a dark room, can be a profound shift in how we relate to the world, to others. But it's only a little candle. Little candles can be snuffed out. Little candles can be blown away. And so we have to keep cultivating, practicing deeper, deeper, until that light becomes the light that perfuses everything, that is everything, that it manifests everything. Mumon's poem, The Dog, the Buddha nature. The truth is manifested in full. A moment of yes and no, lost to your body and soul. This is not the ultimate teaching of Dharma. This is the first case of 48 cases. So, koans and practice in general is not about I'll have some experience and then that's the end of the job. But it's when we have an experience, of course, an experience disappears. All things are impermanent, all things flow through. But when we have a genuine experience, a genuine touching of the interpenetration of all things, of the oneness of all things, of the source of all things, of the light that permeates all things, when we have a genuine touching of that, there is a faith. There is a faith that we practice with. We may not have the experience anymore, all experiences change, but somehow in us we know something is true. And that knowing is the faith that we practice with. These are profound, can be profound practices. And they also can be totally trivial for the wrong person. But I encourage all of you, whatever practice you're doing, to take it completely, thoroughly to the bottom. Get a taste of the real Dharma. And then offer that to the world, whatever way you can. The nice thing about this particular koan, it's not about I'm a broken thing and I'll get fixed. It's about what's already present, can't be gotten, can't be had, because it is your very nature. And so from that perspective, there is enormous hope, enormous affirmation at the bottom of this koan. So please, may all of you taste and know that enormous cosmic yes.